How can love, pride, and identity change the world?
Hey, this is Steph, and welcome to the Together Moving Forward podcast.
A podcast helping 2S LGBTQI plus people embrace self-love and self-respect so you can celebrate yourself with pride. In this episode, you'll discover how embracing your LGBTQ identity builds a foundation for true self-love and confidence. Why love and joy, not just anger, sustain long-term activist and community change. How everyday people can protect LGBTQ rights and strengthen pride through small actions. Today's conversation is about discovering how embracing your LGBTQ identity with pride and self-love can empower you to live authentically and help move our community forward. Hello again, I'm Steph Vachon, and I'm a human being. Welcome back to the Together Moving Forward podcast. Embrace your 2S LGBTQI plus identity with pride through self-love. No matter where you stand in the 2S LGBTQI plus spectrum, we are all connected. And if you ever struggle to fully love and respect yourself, you're not alone. And this podcast is here to help you. As someone who has navigated my own journey of self-acceptance as a queer, I know the power of hearing voices that reflect our experiences. In this podcast, you'll hear real stories and conversations that leave you with practical tools, fresh perspectives, and the confidence to embrace who you are with pride. To start, I need to say that I'm not a psychologist, a specialist, or someone with a college degree. I'm just a regular guy here to share with all of you and support each other. I will share my journey, and we will all share our journeys together. We'll learn from each other how to move forward. Today, I'm so grateful to welcome Cheri DiNovo. Cheri is a minister, author, activist, and former member of the provincial parliament in Ontario, Canada, who has spent decades advocating for justice and equality. As a trailblazer in the fight for the LGBTQ plus rights, she officiated the first legal same-sex marriage in Canada and helped pass numerous landmark human rights laws, including protection for gender identity and expression. So, Cheri, thank you so much for being here with us today, and welcome to the Together Moving Forward podcast.
Oh, my pleasure.
You grew up with major challenges, including being homeless in your youth. How did those early experiences shape who you became, both spiritually and politically?
Great question. I left home at 15, and like many queer kids, most of our street population of youth identifies to as LGBTQ plus, right? So it was partly that, partly very violent home. Yeah, it was safer on the streets, and again, most street kids will say that. Now, I had a welcoming environment of other street kids, so we in the summer, I would sleep in Queen's Park in Toronto, which turned out to be just outside the window of my office when I was elected in 2007. Or, when it wasn't good weather, we would couch surf. Somebody'd have a bachelor apartment and 20 kids would be staying there, kind of thing. I mean, that was street life. We were all drug involved in some way, mostly, almost all actually kind of what we could call soft drugs, LSD, marijuana, etc. But I mean, that was a way to survive, right? And so I learned, many of us died. I have a few very good friends that I've known from that era, from being street kids together, who I discover the ones that survived thrived. Both of them have gone on to pretty amazing careers, one in New York, one in Vancouver. But we do get together. And then on the queer side of things, in 1971, I was at Canada's first Pride on Hanlon's Point, an island just in Toronto. And Mayor Chow just put a plaque up, a bronze plaque to commemorate that. And my girlfriend and I are front and center in that picture. It was a group called Toronto Gay Action. And that was the group that same summer led the We Demand demonstration on Parliament Hill, the first quote unquote gay demonstration that we know of in our history on Parliament Hill. And we were utopian hippie kids, right? So the demands that we made, which look like and sound like basic human rights now were we considered utopian, quite frankly, and that we would never win. There was a handful of us, at most 50, I'm saying, that were at that first Pride and that were at Parliament Hill. I was the only woman to sign on to that. I don't know why. There were other women there, but for some reason I signed on. And we asked for things like not to be fired. If you're rented, not to be kicked out if they discovered that you were queer. To have access to children if you had children, Very simple, basic human rights. And apart from one of them, which said to be treated the same in every respect as heterosexuals, which I don't think we've quite accomplished, but I would say we won everything. We won everything we asked for. So when I speak publicly, always give a lot of, I hope. I hope I give hope, because this is the way the world changes, with a group of kids or with a group of those who have now no power, who simply, refuse to stop and do so, not, I would say, out of anger. Anger can get you going, but it's love and hope and passion that keep you as an activist, being an activist. I love the Rita Mae Brown quote, "An army of lovers will not fail." And, when you're defending your lover and your love or your children, you will not fail. So that's where we were looking back on it. And I always want to stress, we had fun. We had fun. Like, we weren't walking around weeping, it was a joyous pride with a purpose. It was also political, but we were having fun. And I think really that motivates successful activism.
You said to not start with anger, but did you agree that when you start, first you have to start with anger and then you transform it with hope and love? But I think that the anger at first gives you a little bit of fuel, right?
Oh, yeah. It's very spiritual. It's biblical in all the face of the book. There is such a thing as righteous anger. You should be righteously angry, but it doesn't sustain you, right? I mean, I over the long haul, you can't just keep going like that. If there's not joy in the struggle, then the struggle will die out. So I think that was one of the reasons why we've had in the queer movement in Canada such incredible success in comparison to the world. So I like to point to that and say, as contrasted, say, with the feminist movement, of which I was also a part, or with socialism, I've always called myself a socialist, we were astoundingly successful as queer activists on queer issues. And why? I think it's because we were literally defending our love, right? I mean, we were lovers in a dangerous time, to quote Bruce Cockburn. But so that, I think, sustains you, that keeps you going. And so, yeah. And we weren't kind of divided and conquered in that way. Although we were the young radicals within the queer movement. I mean, we were using the term queer back then. We're queer, we're here, get over it was a rallying cry in the early 70s. So there was also at the same time a group in Toronto called the Community Homophile Association of Toronto, CHAT. They were older and we thought they were way too conservative. I mean, the joke was, what is a homophile? Like, have you ever met one? So, so this was, and to put it in context, none of our demands were around trans rights, for example, or gender, that, I mean, not that there wasn't incredible drag and incredible, queens that really led the fight, both here and at Stonewall. But there wasn't the understanding of gender and intersectionality and trans rights the way that developed.
As a United Church minister, how did your faith guide your political activism, especially when pushing for LGBTQ plus rights in a political sphere?
Sure. And when I speak, even in secular surroundings, the last big talk I gave was just a week or so ago to the Ontario Nurses Association. So there are about, 900 nurses in the room and I was the keynote on human rights conference. And so I usually, even in secular crowds, try to give what I call spiritual armor, because Muslims, Jews, and Christians all share the same, what we used to call texts of terror. And what I do is kind of unpack them. Like, for example, Sodom and Gomorrah is a queer positive story, and I uphold that, and I tell them why. When people say Jesus said nothing about homosexuality, I contest that. Jesus, in fact, 2,000 years before Lady Gaga, Matthew 19:12 said some are born that way. He was talking about eunuchs in the Bible, but eunuchs was a very interesting catch-all term. It wasn't just those that were forcibly castrated to look after, the emperors or the leaders' harems, although there were some. And Jesus says in Matthew 19:12, some are born that way, some are made that way for the kingdom of God, maybe, chosen celibates, let's say, probably was what he meant. And some are made that way by others, forcible castration, when he's talking about eunuchs. Now, born that way, I don't think he was talking about intersex people. I don't think he was checking people's genitals at first, I think he was talking about people who have no interest in heterosexual marriage, which, as a rabbi, he was not married, he was already a rebel. And I pointed out, I love to point out a couple of things, because one, at our music director, who the first trans rights law was named after, Toby's Law, in 2012, we passed that in Ontario. So adding gender identity and gender expression to the Human Rights Code here, and then the feds picked it up much later. But it's named after my music director, who came out as trans. And when Toby died of an overdose, not unusual in the trans community, sadly, back then, I said, we must be, because at that point we had a stained glass window still there in that church as a place of pilgrimage, of Toby playing the piano in the sanctuary. And I said, we must be the only sanctuary in Christendom that has the stained glass window of a trans person. And one of Toby's friends called out, what about Joan of Arc? What about Joan of Arc? Yes. What about Joan of Arc? So, and then later I add, what about the Last Supper? Leonardo da Vinci's depiction that's famous. First of all, we now know Leonardo da Vinci was gay. Then if you look at that picture, why is, from the Renaissance, the tradition of always representing John, quotes unquote, the disciple Jesus loved, sitting next to Jesus as feminine? Why? So there you see it, and we've been staring at it for thousands years, right? Look at that figure. Dan Brown is wrong. It wasn't a woman. This was a patriarchy. These were disciples. You can tell by the numbers sitting there. So that's John. It was clearly meant to be John, but always, always presented as feminine, very feminine, if you look at that picture. So just to give people new eyes on this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Leviticus, for example, over 664 rules in Leviticus. Things like don't wear mixed fiber clothing, don't eat shellfish, a million, many, many rules, about, don't sacrificing live animals, for example. And one of them is, men lying with men, should be stoned, okay? Which became a meme that was very popular. It came out of the United States that said, Canada is the first country in the world to get Leviticus, the number, correct, because it has not only legalized same-sex marriage, but also legalized marijuana. So now you have, you must be stoned to, sleep with another man. And now we can live that out with, basically I'm translating the meme. So, I mean, the thing is, why would we uphold that and not the other 663 rules? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I try to give people some spiritual armor, because we, not the Jesus passage, but we share the others passages with the other faiths. And just even for secular people, so they can kind of, if they have a drunken uncle, or they have someone who, says something stupid in the family, or at some cocktail party, they can say, I think there's another way of looking at that passage, or I think there's another way of thinking that. So all to say, I've spent my years in Christianity. My very first book that was published out of UCLA. It was my doctoral thesis. I Americanized it to use American examples, but it was based on my experience in church. It's also theological, with my first church, of growing the church by being inclusive, growing the church by statedly being inclusive. And that's what we did. And so the common think in the United Church was since 1988, which is when I walked into the church, because of 1988, where they said that they would from now on, ordain openly gay and lesbian people to live up to what it said it would do. And so we did that. And when we performed the first legalized same-sex marriage there, that was in 2001. I did it. It was 2 women of color. I have a slide presentation and I show all these pictures from newspapers. Thank God I kept the clippings. And I did it by reading the banns. Ancient form still can be used, of just to read out the names in church for 2 weeks. It's a government form. And instead of going to City Hall or wherever to get a license, which they would have been turned away, then we filled it out, married them, didn't say male or female, said bride, groom. So one of the clerks thought that Paula, the name Paula, was South American, was a man, and vetted it, sent them back a license. So then all hell broke loose. It was the cover of the Toronto Star, license issued. It was the first. And the government of Ontario threatened to take away my license. There was a lot of news about it. The United Church did not support my congregation in doing that, which was horrendous. I mean, they were just silent on the issue. And we were attacked from all sides. But within about a year, the Supreme Court in Ontario ruled that to keep same-sex couples from marrying was counter to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So that de facto made it legal in Ontario just in time before government could really come after us. And so we were lucky to keep that as the first legalized same-sex marriage, never been overturned. So that's, that was, my call to faith was broader than that, but where it intersects with queer politics, it's been from the beginning. From the beginning, I would not have walked into a church had it not been open and inclusive. And then I just held their feet to the fire, and I still am. I still am, because it's one thing to, as you know, be performative in a justice sense, and it's another thing to actually be just. So people say a lot of things. They now, flying the pride flag is something banks do, while at the same time, the same banks in the Caribbean are happy to enforce government laws that are anti-queer. So there's performative justice around queer issues, and then there's real justice. And so that still continues both in church and state, I think. But anyway, next question.
I think you already even answered for the. Well, the next question was about the marriage. I think you already answered it.
Yes.
Or it was like, well, what I wanted to add, if you would like, is how did that make you feel to be the first one?
Well, I'm still fighting as a feminist and as a queer woman, and as an anti-racist, that this actually happened. And thank goodness there's proof, right? But I mean, you see, one of the sad things about being a dinosaur like I am, I'm proud of that. I'm proud I'm still alive, despite everything, is that you start to see history being rewritten while you're still alive, which is very interesting. And so I keep kind of upholding. So that's why it's so important, I think, in our movement for queer rights to have allies in Black lives rights, and Indigenous rights and workers' rights. And these struggles are interdependent. They are not independent. And the same forces that attack, our sisters and brothers and others on those movements, the union movement, are the same ones that attack us. Yeah. And if we think they're not, we just have to look at the world right now, where things change very quickly, not, south of the border, not well, and even in Canada, in Saskatchewan and Alberta, for example, all these rights are under threat, and they're under threat by the same forces that have always been there. They are just getting louder. And so we have to be very, I think, very careful, because we will always be in a minority, and minority rights are what rights are for everyone. But we have to be very, very clear that we also have allies, and we should work with them. And I think also, and successfully work across the aisle, we should never stop the educational component of our activism, because we need those who disagree politically, for example, and those who disagree in other areas to agree with us on our rights, right? And we need to make that very, very clear across aisles of all sorts. So that's important as well. That's how I got laws changed. I would not have got laws changed if I had worked with liberals and conservatives. And I'm really glad I had a conservative sign on to all my bills that passed except for one, which is banning conversion therapy. We still got it done. I got it done on my own, essentially, but with no support. But it de facto had support from a majority liberal government at that point. But I mean, the thing is, now I just went to the Trans Day of Remembrance at Queen's Park. One of my bills, the last bill to pass, which requires that all the members of the House stand up for a moment of silence on the November the 20th or closest to that, and then each political party speak to it for 5 minutes. So that is still going since 2017, and it's still going with a majority conservative government because one of their names is on that bill, right? So I think it's really, especially in this environment in the world where the right wing is growing, that we work across the aisle as well as with our allies, in all sorts of other ways as well, that we're good allies to them so that they will be good allies to us, And so probably answered more than one question.
No, yeah, but it's perfect. What I was going to say is we can't never take anything for granted. That's what I'm learning at my age now. And that we always have to be on our guards and always be looking like to the left, to the right, behind, everywhere, to make sure that there's not something coming up. Because it looks like right now what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing is that it starts with one person, with one president on one thing. And then it feels like all the other ones just go ahead. Oh, he's doing it. We're all going to do it, So
yeah, well, it's always been there, is what it says to me.
Yeah.
We didn't do a good enough, deep enough change of people's consciousness, right? We didn't do a good educational job. I mean, this is why it was so important to be in schools, to have gay straight alliances in schools, which is the law in Ontario for Catholic board as well as for separate, for separate school boards as well as public. It's really important to have that as a law. And it's really important to have an educational component on 2S LGBTQ issues. And if the schools aren't doing it, then we need to do it. We need to make sure that kids know these things. We can't just depend on culture. We can't depend on movies and TV and social media,
no.
do it for us, because that will shift. And we've seen how quickly, again, those with money shift to meet whatever the, ruler wants, of the day. So we have to look after that piece and, be a presence wherever we are. Like we've kind of from the beginning had our own little safe ghettos in most cities, our little places. And one of the joys is to see that spread across, cities, but it's just as easy to see it contract again, right? And because of safety issues. And I would hate to see that. I think wherever we are, if we're in a minority, if there's just one of us in that room, that we need to make sure our presence is felt where it can do some good, right? And to speak up, just to do what we were doing as kids. We had nothing to lose. I mean, we had that advantage. Most of us didn't have jobs. And so, we could speak up. So without fear of repercussion, we kind of said, bring it on. We were really in people's face. But so does all activism start. But now we're at a point where I think we really need to ensure each other's safety and the safety of all the laws that we've passed, to just make sure that we're still speaking up and we're still, getting a backbone in positions where it might not be the popular thing to do. For example, in Ontario, there is a conservative who gave the 5-minute address who has a trans daughter. I met him when I was speaking at prides across the province. And he came out of the crowd, and it was a very conservative town, a small town, to tell me about their family and what their family had gone through and how supportive they were of her. And that's great. We need allies in the other. And we need allies in all parties. And we need people that are queer in all parties to be themselves in all parties too, because Lord knows they were always there. They just didn't come out for fear, for safety, real safety reasons. But it's time now. It's time, right? It's time to be brave again.
Yeah, I kind of feel a little bit guilty because when I came out, things were hard, but then it became so much easier for us really, really quick. So I never felt until lately that I had to do something. And even I have a lot of straight friends that used to tell me, see, now things are so great now. You got married, you have your own son, everything is perfect. Everything is great in schools and there's no more problems. But so that reminds me that how we have to be so much on our guards all the time. And that's why they're taking all away the education in some parts of in too many parts of the world right now, because they don't want people to know that we're there. And
it definitely, we cannot let them divide us, which they are very successfully doing. Because by attacking trans folk and gender diverse people, hence the TERFs in England, right? I mean, it's sort of center of that, but not only there, I mean, these are lesbians, these are bisexual women who are denying, denying the rights of their trans sisters. Like this, we can't let them divide us that way. And that is what they are doing. So, again, if we think for a moment that they will stop at going after trans people, we do not know our history and the history of the world, because that's how they started in Nazi Germany in the 30s, Berlin, going after trans people. Those were among the first that were sent to concentration camps because they had identity cards, right? And so, again, this is the way history plays. And the other quote that I've been using a lot lately, other than Rita Mae Brown's, is Hegel's, who said, what we learn from history is that we do not learn from history. And let's not make that true again. Let's learn from our history and know that we can't be divided, to support each other and educate ourselves about it if that's what we need. But yeah.
I have to share with you something that's really bugging me with what you just said, is that how, like, for example, for me, what I went through as a gay kid, how could I even think of not include the rest of my community and be there for them? Like, I know how it feels to be put down, to be, bullied and all that. So with how I went through, everything I went through, I know how it feels to be persecuted. So my first thought is like, well, I got to help my community. So why do you think that people within our community would just be like, oh, they're not attacking me right now, so I won't help? Like, why?
I don't understand it either from an ethical point of view. I understand it as a career move. I understand it as trying to be safe. When first, the old Martin, quote, first they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, blah, blah, blah. First they came for the communists, and they came, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't any of those. So, then they came for me and there was no one left. Well, again, part of history, right? So first they're coming for the trans people because most of North America, quite frankly, has probably never met one. They might have met one and they didn't know, you know what I mean? But I mean, because it's a small minority, and so they can make this, group of people who are not understood a scapegoat and get away with all sorts of other things. And to see openly gay and lesbian people doing that, to me, is shocking lack of ethics, and for the most personal aggrandizement reasons. Do you know what I mean? Like, to seemingly, I mean, I'm thinking of a certain, is she still, she's still, there in the federal government, who has been supporting Pierre Poilievre's, statements about trans people. I mean, how can she sit next to this man and not say something? Does she not recognize that she's next?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like it's being so selfish, but even at the same time, it's like being so blind. I don't know. I don't. I really try to understand and ask questions to so many people about it, and I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's like, to me, it's just a lack of empathy and just the word selfishness. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, they can't, and those folks that I'm thinking about people with power and degrees, have no excuse.
Mm.
They have no excuse. It doesn't take a lot to read a book,
Exactly.
to do some research about what it is to be gender diverse or trans. I mean, I was doing a little bit of research myself about the incidence of intersex, for example, because I have a friend who is, and based on what we know, it looks like it's about as common as having red hair, being born with red hair. So even that has been with us since the beginning of time. And so how can we even question, gender diverse and gender questioning, because gender can be questioned, at its very beginning. So, I mean, and we've seen this in nature and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, the bottom line is educate yourself. And if you don't, it's willful for people in power. And for those who maybe it's not willful, then it's the job of all your allies to not let it pass, not let the jokes pass, the bad jokes, not let the abuse pass, not let the comment pass. You don't have to be nasty. You don't have to be confrontational. You just have to question and say, well, I don't really think that's accurate. Or maybe you should look at it a different way. Or, these are the conversations I still have. I still have them with, relatives who, are brave enough to say something, but I mean, I still have it within the confines of my own, biological family, not my queer family, but, I mean, I still am addressing lack of education out there wherever I go. And so I always, when I speak, say, there's no stupid question, please just ask it, because it's so important that we educate, both ourselves and others on especially trans issues, because people just don't know. And yeah.
Yeah. Looking at where things stand today in faith communities, in politics, in queer rights, what hope do you hold for the future? And what message of resilience would you like to leave for the next generation of queer activists and believers?
Sure. Well, back to the beginning, a group of utopian hippies with no power can change the world. So you, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever circumstance you find yourself in, you can change the world. You need some allies, but you don't need a lot. You don't need to be an army. You don't need to have 100,000 people in the street. You need to simply have passion and know that you're an army of lovers. Know that love is on your side. That passion and joy are what you represent. And that's what the struggle has always represented. Let us be joyful. Let us have fun. Let us love. That will never lose. It's like saying whatever the gender, a kind of parent's love for their children. You attack my children, you're going to hear from me. I don't care who you are. Well, it's that kind of love we feel for each other. And that kind of love will not be defeated easily. And so I hold to that, and be yourself. And, yeah, I'm very optimistic about the future. At the end of the day, I'm just optimistic in people's capacity to love each other, even if it's only a few people, even if it's only one person. If you know what that is, if you've experienced that, which I hope most of us have, then you're going to resist. You're going to resist violence. You're going to resist all sorts of ugliness, because you will, I hope, represent, see in the other who you are on some level, and keep on quietly being an agent of change. You don't have to be in the streets to do that. Just wherever you are, your workplace, your home life, your school, wherever, just be that person who questions. Just be that quiet voice in the back of the classroom who says, I think there might be a different way of seeing that, or that's not been my experience, and then back it up with educate yourself and educate others. That is the continual, one at a time work that is as important, I think, still, as it is to be in the streets, right? So, yeah, and I find I'm doing both still in a kind of weird way, and I was just really lucky to get into politics and, be elected and be able to actually change laws. But, we still exist too. So I always say to activists is, first of all, do the necessary groundwork, get the numbers behind you, because politicians sadly look at polling and look at numbers. So get the numbers, find a champion that is in elected office, and support them as they support you. This is how we've changed laws. But also in your world, wherever you are, change it, right? Change where you are. And then that in turn fuels the other. And that's the quiet, but sometimes difficult and challenging work of changing hearts, minds, and souls. And I have no doubt that we will do it, because we are an army of lovers. Right?
Wow. Thank you so much, Cheri.
Oh, it's my joy.
You've given me a lot of fuel to keep going.
It's joyous. Just have fun doing it. I mean, if nothing else, our movement has always been about rejoicing. Like, I wish there were more queer clubs still. I mean, but I'm lucky in my West End of Toronto, we have a little, woman-owned queer club, but they're dying out now, like for young people. I mean, partly success, our own success, like we're welcome. You can dance with anybody anywhere, but dance with anybody anywhere, I'd say. Like, keep it a dance, So I have relatives in Southern California. I'm not going there anymore because of Trump, sadly, of the weather a Canadian winter. But there in San Diego, I went to this huge bar and dance club that was woman-owned, like it was all genders and queer-owned. And my nephew and his husband I stay with down there, and so we find these places, but it advertised itself as the last club like it in Southern California. What? So I mean, I don't espouse us just sticking with our own, but I do want to remind folk that it started in a dance hall. I mean, it started having fun in bars and places you could dance and get together, and let's keep dancing. Let's just keep dancing.
Exactly. Wow. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And it was a privilege to meet you. Thank you. I'll let you go and
My pleasure. Bye.
say bye.
Before we wrap up, let's come back to the 3 powerful takeaways from today's episode. First, embracing your LGBTQ identity is the foundation of true self-love and confidence. When you allow yourself to fully accept who you are, you create the strength to live authentically and proudly. Second, we learned that love and joy, not just anger, are what sustain long-term activism and real community change. Passion may start a movement, but hope, connection, and love are what keep it alive. And third, protecting LGBTQ rights doesn't always require grand gestures. Small actions, speaking up, educating others, and supporting one another are how everyday people help strengthen pride and move our community forward. I'm always looking for inspiring guests for the podcast, and I'd love to have you or someone you know share your journey with pride. The world needs your story. It has the power to change lives, and your voice matters. Reach out and send me an email today. Also, I am now booking keynote speaking engagements. My talk is From Survival to Self-Love, how I finally learned to embrace my LGBTQ identity with pride, and how you can too. Details at togethermovingforwardpodcast.com under speaking. It is already time to say au revoir just for now. Join me every Monday and Thursday for brand new episodes of the Together Moving Forward podcast and learn how to embrace your 2S LGBTQIA plus identity with pride through self-love. Wherever you are from in the world, we are all connected. Remember, solidarity beats hate. The more we unite, the stronger we become. Because at the end of the day, we are all equally human and we all deserve the same rights. One last thing before I go, put your hand on your heart and repeat after me. Yes, you and me together. I have a community that supports and uplifts me. Yep, I have a community that supports and uplifts me. From shame, guilt, silence, and rejection to pride, freedom, healing, and love. Together moving forward. Thank you so much for being here with me today, for sharing this journey of growth and love. I truly appreciate you. See you all soon. Ciao. Do you know anyone in the LGBTQ plus community who feels disconnected from their true self, wishing they could embrace their identity with confidence and pride? Share this episode now and help them step into self-love and self-respect so they can truly celebrate who they are with pride, feel empowered, and make a real difference in our community.